You can absolutely conquer whatever it is you choose to confront. In this show, we talk PTG, we listen and believe, we support and empower. Whether you have experienced domestic violence personally or not, someone you know has. Your circle of family, friends, acquaintances, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will experience domestic violence at some point in their life. Physical abuse is only one of the many forms of domestic violence. Survivors also report experience of verbal, emotional, spiritual, sexual, financial, electronic, and so much more. Domestic violence does not discriminate. It can leave you traumatized and devastated, mentally, emotionally, financially. You can find yourself homeless, jobless, helpless. The list can go on. There's blankets of insecurities, triggers, doubts, and other residual effects that become hurdles that impact our life as we do our best to move on. Many people associate butterflies with a sense of freedom. We've been taught along the way to focus on the transformation that takes place inside of the cocoon. I invite you to take a moment to conceptualize all the odds the caterpillar was up against and needed to defeat in order to get to a safe place, to build its cocoon and actually experience the transformation. My name is A. Garcia. I am a mother and survivor of a double attempted homicide. Now, I'm dedicating my life to take yours to the next level by experiencing post-traumatic growth to begin a new chapter in your life. Let's get started on this journey together. Confronting Domestic Violence is a 501c3. All contributions, volunteers, and sponsorships are welcomed. It takes a community to make a difference. Nobody should suffer alone. Please scan the QR code. Hey, Garcia here. Thank you for tuning in and welcome to Confronting Domestic Violence, which is not intended to ignite any triggers. For what you want to conquer, you must confront. Today, I have a guest who is willing to openly share their experience being a teacher in the school setting. So thank you, and welcome, Michelle.
Thank you for having me.
It is certainly a pleasure, and we have talked behind the scenes quite a bit, and I got to interview you a little bit before we got started. So we have some interesting topics to talk about, and we're just going to be open and natural. There's no skit here or no pre-questionnaires that was looked at or reviewed prior to. We just go with the flow.
I like it.
Okay, our listeners, I just want to say that this particular guest is not a victim of domestic violence nor a survivor of domestic violence. She has not experienced domestic violence in her life, and I'm so happy to hear that. And we all embrace that and wish we had the same story. However, statistics show 1 out of 3 are affected, either because we've been exposed to it or we've been a recipient of it. And so with you being in the school system, and I mean at all levels, elementary, middle, high school, there's so many questions that I have that I'm so honored that you are open and willing to answer.
I'm happy to shed light on whatever I can, because I agree, like there's too much of this that we're not talking about. And so I might not have first-hand experience, but just being part of this and just wanting to do what I can to help people who have find the help they need or to be able to reach out. Because it's something that I think the more we don't talk about these things, the harder it is. And we think it's shame, it's our fault. But the more we acknowledge and that we can shed light on it and work together to help each other through these difficult times. And I just want to do whatever I can do to help.
Thank you. And we appreciate that. This is a place of sharing knowledge and spreading empowerment and just having that community type setting. It's really about inspiring one another. And not only are we moms, professionals, neighbors, sisters, daughters, you name it, we're so many titles and we wear so many hats, and just feeling supported in all of that is really crucial, I think. So
I agree. Yes.
yeah. So let's just dive right in. When it comes to training as a teacher and in all levels, in all settings, in all classrooms, is there any formal training that teachers receive as it relates to signs to look for in children as it relates to violence, domestic violence, or child abuse?
It has been a while since I've been in the classroom, but from what I can remember, like maybe a handout here or there, and maybe a little bit of in visual training, but it was more like how to talk to people. But there really wasn't much that I can remember in terms of if I actually saw it, what I should do. Um, and I think that's part of the problem is that we don't know what signs to look for. And I don't know if that's changed since I've been in the classroom. It's been about 8 years since I've been out of the classroom. But from my experience, I wouldn't have personally known what to do if I had seen it or even necessarily what to look for.
So it would pretty much have to be either something that you're seeing with your own eyes, or the student maybe opening up and saying, "Look at the bruise that I got from my mommy or daddy," or somebody like just saying, "My mom and dad fight all the time," or "My mom had a black eye," or "My dad got stabbed." Is it something like that?
Honestly, most of my experience was in high school. So you have these kids for 15 minutes a day. And so we put a lot on the teachers to recognize these signs. But if you can get the students that might be acting out, and you might pull them aside to ask them questions about what might be going on at home. But a lot of them at that age aren't going to respond to you. Or the key is, I think, really is that you have to start to develop those relationships with them, which will take time. And then by the time you have that relationship, they're already out your door. And they might come back to see you during the day, but you're really only getting 50 minutes with 30 kids in your room at a time. And so to really, while you're supposed to have your eyes focused on the curriculum, making sure they're getting ready to test, making sure that they're going to get ready for college. And so it feels like the personal stuff is on the back burner. That's not important. And I think that's a detriment to what we're doing in terms, because it's all about the personal and the connection and the relationship. And I feel at fault for that as well. As much as I try to do that, it feels that we need a little bit more training and development into how to make that happen. Or I don't even know necessarily how possible it is when you see 130 kids a day, like to make those relationships, depending on how they're working it.
Wow, you're really shedding a lot of light into that, because thinking about it for teachers, right, you have anywhere from 50 to 150 students a day, and then you have a job to teach, and then the children are looking for that connection. The children do seek that, and not just attention, but and connection, but also the recognition from you as a teacher. And then if their parents are neglecting them or absent, or they feel lonely, and they're looking at the teacher to have that connection, it's like, how much of yourself can you truly extend, and how able are you to actually be able to look at them individually and assess if they're okay mentally and emotionally?
I was teaching high school English, so between the workload of correcting papers and doing all that, that was at the forefront, making sure that happened before the relationship. So it becomes difficult to have. And also, also you think about in terms of parent involvement. I worked at school where there wasn't much parent involvement, but at the same time, I think also if you hear from your teacher, your first reaction is, oh, as soon as the phone rings, like, right? If you recognize the number, or because even as a society, we have this idea only negative information is going to get transmuted back to me. The teacher's calling me because my kid didn't turn their work or my kid acted up. And at our school, we were trying to change that philosophy a little bit with postcards or things to trying to point out the good things. But I think part of it is that we've been focusing on the negative so long. We have these expectations they need to meet. And if they don't meet them, then there's something wrong. And so each kid is so different that we're not focusing on how to grow those strengths. We're always just, oh, they're not good at math or they're not good at English. They need extra help in this. But it's not looking at the person as a whole. And I don't think I see that changing a little bit in my kids' school from the outside looking in a little bit. At the same time, we've always been so academic focused. And how do we make those changes? How do we start talking about emotions and stuff when we think that's not part of school? But that's the key to it, is being able to recognize why we feel the way we do, and then what can we do about it? Because we can't control anyone else but ourselves, but we can control our reaction to someone else. So that teenager that gets angry because of what's happening to them, what do they do with that anger? Are they going to bottle it inside? Are they going to acknowledge it and react differently because they're acknowledging it? Or are they just going to lash out because they don't know what to do? And unless we learn those skills and we're teaching them in elementary how to identify that, how to adjust to those feelings. Because as much as I say, oh, we're always going to be happy, that is never going to happen. We are humans. We're going to go through states, no matter how much personal development we do or not. But it's about the recognizing it and then acknowledging those feelings to say, how am I going to do I have that thought process where I can think about how am I going to react before I just react? And so that's where we're should be working with teaching our kids, but we're so focused on the academic. Even kindergarten is now the new first grade of the old days. There's no play. There's not as much playtime. My kindergarten was half day, or we had
Right.
naps. Or
Yeah.
there is no such thing as a nap in my daughter's kindergarten classroom. Even in the 4K, it's half day, but now we have a half day 4K. And I think the work schedule has impacted this because really the kids are in school because of our work day. But how do we manage that? Or they're at school longer than they're with us as parents.
That's right.
And how do we balance that? But it really comes down to understanding the emotional intelligence and trying to get that across in the schools, which I see some schools starting to do that, but I don't know how much prevalent it is. But it really starts with that, because if we don't understand what to do with these feelings or how to acknowledge them or how to make better decisions, we're going to keep going through the same cycles. And when I was teaching again 8 years ago, I didn't see that help alongside of it. It was stuff that was starting to possibly come around a little bit. And again, I don't know how prevalent that is in schools today, but it is something that is needed in schools.
And that's where I was going with all of this. Is basically what I'm hearing from you is back then there really wasn't any resources available for them, but now 8 years later, and being the outsider looking in, and through your daughter, you're able to see that there are different types of resources there. But then the gap is still that emotional intelligence really isn't being brought to the table, or positive problem solving skills not being brought to the table early enough in school to really educate the children on how to better cope and better speak up and out in order to not bottle it up and stay in a situation feeling isolated. Am I summing it up pretty well?
And I think part of it is also educating the parents in how to respond to their kids after school. Because I've been trying to, especially with my younger daughter, she's been struggling in school because there's a certain student in her school that every day he might destroy the classroom. And then they have to move classrooms. And it's been a frequent thing in her school or in her room. So it's like having those conversations with her, because now I'm starting to see that behavior more prevalent in her at home than I did before this year started. And it could be also just with the different situations, but it's also just how as parents then do we orchestrate it and understand. And I'm not saying it's a school because kids are kids. Like it's all this adjustment periods, learning how to work with different people. But now my forefront job thinking with my daughter is how do I make sure that she has a safe place to come home and tell me about her day? Because there's some days where she doesn't want to talk, there's other days where she wants. And so I noticed a couple times she'll come up to me while I'm cooking dinner. And I just want to make sure I'll say to her, Lily, can we do this in 5 minutes? Because I want to make sure I can give you my full undivided attention. I don't want to be half doing something. So orchestrating that point so that she can talk about her day and what emotions she's going through to not have those same reactions, like that she's having that conversation. So we've been working on that because I see that going between the two schools, between home and school for her. I want to make sure that she's got a safe space to talk about it. So I think as parents, we need to have that space for our kids. And it's hard with our schedules and it's after school activities and like all this stuff. But how do we start that? Even if we have those after school activities and during that car ride into let's talk about some of these things and not let's just zone out. We got to make the time where we have it. And it's uncomfortable. Last weekend, I spent 45 minutes in the hallway talking with my son, sitting there in silence almost because he didn't want to open up about what was going on with him. And it's that having those uncomfortable conversations and silences and not always having to fill the silences, which is what I'm learning the hard way because we were so ready to talk to and fix people's problems. So I can't just tell my daughter what to do with the problem at school. I need to let her just keep talking until she comes up with a solution, which has been hard. And almost pursing my lips so I don't just try to fix it. Because how does
Especially
that
in the
help her problem
teenage
solve?
years.
Yes, especially with the teenage years, which is why with my son who's turning 12 on Christmas Eve, I was he's getting there. So it's like,
Yes.
how do we start that process now so they know? 'Cause I know those silent years are coming. Like the mood changes, the mood swifts. And so how do we make sure that we've left that door open to have those conversations with us in the school and out of the school? So I'm also with my daughter's situation, I'm emailing back and forth with the teacher and stuff and seeing how to handle that. So it's being on top of that stuff. But it's disheartening, but it's also reality. There are kids that are struggling and they need an education too. So it's like making that dynamic work. But knowing that my daughter's in this situation, I have to be more open to hearing her about her day, making sure I make the time to let her get that out, and express her feelings. Because it's about expressing them so that we can figure out how to adjust it. As teachers, sometimes that's a little bit harder because we don't have, when in the middle school and high school, when we don't have the kids for as long. Elementary, it's a little bit different. And so that's where I was seeing the emotion charts and stuff with the kids a little bit and taking that time, but it depends on the school. And I don't know how prevalent that is, but I was seeing that a little bit with their school.
And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the smaller children are more open and innocent with, they don't know really what they're sharing or what they're saying. They're just being boldly honest.
I think that's the case till about third and fourth grade is where I think that shifts when they start to recognize and they all of a sudden want to be like, or and then they struggle, they want to fit in. And it's starting that way because I can even in those conversations with my first graders, I struggle to have friends or I struggle, I want to do this, but then this person won't let me. And so they're already starting to recognize, she's already starting to recognize that. But then I think there's even a bigger shift by the fourth and fifth grade when they're in their modes where they want to completely fit in or they're feeling like the outsider. And it's like, how do we encourage them to express themselves without feeling like they have to fit in, but can still be themselves? And that's a hard struggle because if they're not getting along with other students or stuff, that becomes hard. And that's where navigating those waters becomes so difficult as a teacher and a parent in those situations and trying to figure out, like if a student comes up to me when I was teaching high school and saying, well, I'm struggling with this group and stuff, it's how much do you get involved in calling those other students in, or how much do you listen to the student to see if they can work it out? But I always start with listening to the student and again, not trying to fix it first and letting them see what conclusions they can come up with. Then moving on to other steps, depending on how bad the situation is. But let's start with more listening and less fixing it. Purse your lips if you need to, and truly just let them, when they come to a silence, don't feel that as a need to jump in right away. Because usually when they have time to process or think, because a lot of times we are like, oh yeah, I know what they're saying, and you try to finish their words. That might not be what they were trying to say. And we've just shut them down. And
Right.
it's really, again, which what I stand for is just the connectedness of trying to connect as much as we can with each other. And the way we do that is really listening and not trying to, and really just, yeah, sorry, really listening to them, but really trying to let them navigate that as you're listening and validating their thoughts because they need to get these thoughts to keep going through their head out. But if you're going to tell them, oh, it's okay, or this or that, then they're going to shut that down. They're going to keep those thoughts are going to keep going. But you want to give them a release to figure out, oh, okay, this might be happening to other people, but they have to get that out themselves. You have to wait to listen until they are the ones that come up with the solution. And you may not necessarily like their solution all the time, but it's guiding them once they get there as a parent and a teacher.
And that's what I was going to say, parent and teacher, because it's parallel. And it's like the parent and the teacher is co-parenting and relying on each other to build this same team type of aspect in raising the child. But it seems like it's just so much on both sides. And from me listening to this, it seems like there's that gap of just that, like, continuity between school and home, and having this understanding of emotional intelligence. Because see, if when you teach that in the class but you're not teaching it at home, then there's this almost like contradiction, right? It causes confusion. And it seems like you're identifying gaps that need to be filled here as it relates to available resources or outlets at all levels of schools for children to go to, without putting all of that burden really on the teacher, and all of that maybe uncomfortableness on the child feeling like the teacher is the only place, if they just felt like there was a safe place without any scrutiny or opinions or judgments, there would probably be a lot more coming to that table that the children are able to release. And this is really just based on what you're sharing with me here. And I feel so compelled to, like, what do we need to do to fill these gaps here? Because it's so true. How and where can the kids really find a space to really work through that? Because I have to ask this question. When you went from elementary to middle to high school, did anybody share with you as a teacher through your training or through the books, through the university, wherever you went to be successful in that arena? Did anybody say, okay, this age group acts this way, so you should respond this way? Is there like categories on what behaviors to expect and how to respond? Or is this
No,
learned as you go?
there is, that's part of the child development courses you take, at least I did with my education. And yes, there are like, again, those are ranges. And then we're boxing
Textbook.
kids in. And the same thing with baby milestone. They should crawl by this and they should exhibit this by this. But again, these are generalizations. And each kid's different. Yes, we have those markers in our heads and like where they should be at. Same thing with the standards, right? Why we came up with educational standards so that every kid should reach this benchmark by this age. But again, kids are going to have the things that they're good at and the things that they're struggling with. And we're always though focusing on the struggles and making sure that those get met to the standards. And then we don't foster the positives as much as, at least in my experience, with that, because we're so worried about the gaps, right? We're so worried about, okay, this student's not really good at math. They're great in English, but we're going to focus on the math because they really need remedial math. And we're going to pound that into them and say, you need to get better at this. And I think that's a detriment as well, that we have every student should have this thing, and we need all of this to succeed, which isn't necessarily the case, but we don't necessarily focus on the positives more than we do the negatives. You need to get to this benchmark. Because that's what the great standards are. Like we have these nationwide standards now, and every state adopts them a little bit differently, or every school a little bit differently. But that's what we're benchmarking the kids on, that they need to reach these standards. And if they don't, then we've failed them, which we do have to have something to measure them. But at the same time, encouraging those positives more and really fostering those. And again, because we have 30 in a room, a lot of times the kids that are excelling might not get the help they need in terms of moving forward, because we're so focused on the kids down here that aren't doing well. And
Thank
that's
you
where
for saying
which I have experienced. My neighbor was telling me about that, where her son was doing so well in reading that he never once read with the teacher during the entire year, because the teacher was on IEPs and things with the students who weren't doing well. So he always read with the aide, but that's not necessarily equality either. Again, it's a huge discrepancy every which way we look at it, but you get 30 kids in a room, 20, whatever number it is, 30s in my head, because that's what I had for high school. But actually, my kids' classrooms have been more around 22, to be honest with you, for elementary. But it depends on the school, depends on things, but you get this many kids, and it seems like there's the good range, I think, is 15 to 25, and then too less, too few. They don't have that, which we were talking about group dynamics. They don't have that to bounce off of each other. And then too many, then it's hard to give that individualized as a teacher to that student. So it really does depend on the schools and the class size and the class dynamics, because every classroom, every period is just so different. I could have 3 ninth grade English classes, and all 3 of them were just so different depending on the dynamics of the kids. And as a teacher, you have to be willing to adjust to that. But I had other teachers who would just do the exact same thing per period. And it's always, being a teacher is just such a dynamic position, because you have to be so versatile. The kids aren't getting something. Is, if I move on, what was the point? But then if I stay here, then all of a sudden they're missing on this standard. And so it's always this thought process going on. So my hat goes off to teachers. I've been there, but I'm not doing it right now. But they have such a dynamic job where it's always on. And you think about those bad days you had. I can think about this as a teacher. If you're like just feeling grumpy and upset, you were on. You were in front of kids, no matter what. They are amazing. And this, I could think of some of those days where all I want to do is crawl into a corner and cry. And I'm like, and trying to put on a bright smile, but it's so true. You are always on, no matter what. There's no downtime, except for that 5 minute, at least in high school, for passing period. But like, all of a sudden, you're back on. And so my hat goes off to them because it is such a dynamic position that we do not give them credit for. They are amazing. And they're a dying breed right now because we aren't giving them the credit. We're making them overworked. We're giving them too many regulations, too many things, and we're not letting them be creative because they have to reach these standards. The more creativity we leave in the teacher's hands to make those judgment calls, because every classroom, every period is so different. I don't care if there's 3 third grade, first grade classes. I think at my kid's daughter, hers is the only class that is doing that has to be rearranged to one of the other classes. It's not like that's happening to the other class. That makes a different dynamic for that classroom. Everyone is so different, and we're trying to standardize them,
Right.
which we can't standardize humans. Like, we need to embrace our differences and creativities and let that shine and give each other a space to show our greatness, because it's all in all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. And children need to have that understanding, because without it, they stay in this segmented inside the box. And all that pressure of meeting this quota is put upon them. And it's almost like that stress factor involuntarily and unknowingly becomes debilitating. And not saying that it does, but it can. And it has for some. And it's really sad, because you brought up a really good point. That's why I said thank you earlier, because you're right. When those other students who are excelling and are above the standard, they get held back. They're not able to move forward. And I remember back in grammar school myself, where I'm from, that did happen one time. And I think I was in second grade and he was promoted to third grade. But that was the one and only time in my entire life. But it actually happened. And I've never seen it since. And I wonder about that. And there's some states that there's no, what is it called, no fail law, where even if you're not meeting standards, you still pass. And so how is that setting them up for success? It's really weird. Like you said, the dynamics have changed across the board. My hat and heart goes out to all the teachers as well. And right now, with hybrid or at home and just all the pressures of the everything, just social life and just everything, how can we and how do we now teach that emotional intelligence and provide an actual outlet for these students to feel like they can truly be authentic in how they're feeling and exert their emotions the way that they need to, outside of home and like separate from school, but somewhere like in that in between space?
Right.
How can we do that as a community, as a society, as moms, as teachers, as people that have gone through it, seen it, know, and I can identify some of these gaps? How can we close some of them? Do you have any ideas or suggestions to moms or teachers out there to maybe start something somewhere for these students and children, our future?
For me, at least, so I don't want to generalize or anything, but for me, with my experience, what I want to say is it was really, which is why I create Connecting Mamas, it's really about the connection. But it's really, I think, as moms, really connecting to yourselves first and figure out what lights you up. Because before I did that, my son and I are like very similar in personality a little bit. And so we would have a screaming match like no other. He was a 6-year-old, 9-year-old. We would just be like having no other screaming match, right? I was like, there's no way you can't yell. I'm not saying I don't yell to this day, not anything at all. But what I noticed was when I finally started doing and figure out what I wanted to do, we generally connected. He suddenly, because I wanted to do this business, he all of a sudden wanted to help me with my videos or just do things and ask me questions and be supportive of it. And having these conversations, because he saw that it lit me up. And so it led us to do more genuine things together. And my recommendation, honestly, is starting with yourself. As backwards as it sounds, but as moms, we think that we need to focus so much on what the kids are doing. And we will schedule their day like nobody's others, but do we put time in there for ourselves or time to go with our friends or to figure out what we want to do? We need space and we need time to think about it, because when we start shining that, then we start bringing the kids in, and we're at the capacity now where I can have those conversations with my son. I can spend 45 minutes in the hallway with him in silence, which before it would have been a shouting match.
Right.
But it's taking that time and space and giving ourselves that grace and that feeling like we're human. I still do have shouting matches with him. They are lessened though. And I can see him, the thought process change in him. The other day when we were driving the car, he and his sister started fighting. And then I just said, fine, we're leaving. And we had I bit my tongue, and the entire 30 minutes back in the car was completely silent. No one said a word. Didn't have the radio, nothing. And he was just like, I know I need to go to bed because I didn't do this. And I was like, that's your choice. I'm not telling you anything. And so he goes to go get ready for bed. He puts himself in bed and he comes down 5 minutes later. Mom, you're right. I'm really sorry. And starts telling me something that his sister was doing that he didn't share in the car, what made him so upset, but he wasn't sharing that. And so it's really just more giving each other that space. And it takes time. And we're so impatient and we want to say, okay, we need to fix this right now. And it's really, I think for each of us, is just taking that step backwards and giving space between each other and trying to make that connection and making those intentional. Like I said, if you don't have much time because you're running around, have those car rides where you're asking, even you don't necessarily need to start off like, oh, how was your day? Because everyone gets sick of that question, right? You might want to say, what's something funny that happened today? But just starting the conversation about leave the radio off, leave everything off, and then just, even if they have those conversation cards, get something that just starts the process, because it's not that easy to necessarily come up with that stuff. So we're looking for new ideas to create new habits. Because right now we're in habits where we keep to ourselves. We don't want connections with other people. We say we want them, but we've, as a society, turned ourselves off. When you think about back in the day, people used to live in villages, people used to have stuff. All of a sudden now we have our little boxes, we drive our little boxes, and we're supposed to do everything independently, and we're supposed to know how to do anything. And if we don't know it, then we give ourselves problems and say that's when your negative starts. I should know how to do this. I'm really dumb. I should know. I should be able to do this better. And then we just have that negative self-talk. Really, though, comes down to giving yourself that space. And when we as moms start to take that space, then we can pass those habits on to our kids. And I think that's where it starts. It's just us individually making that choice to be intentional about it.
I agree. I agree. Being intentional is the absolute guide, because you feel yourself, like you say, you can't control anybody but yourself. You don't know anybody better than yourself. When you're feeling triggered or your blood is getting warm and you know that you're
Yes.
about to respond or react instead of respond the way you want to. So if you're able to check yourself, is what I say, check yourself and remind yourself of what the intention is, you can quickly shift that trigger or that adrenaline that you're feeling at that time, because you're reminding yourself of your intention. And then when it's in front of your little guys, come on, you're the role model. What you're doing is they're either going to emulate that behavior or accept it later.
I think that's the key right there, is what you said, role model, because they are going to do what you want. So when I think of myself before I became an entrepreneur, before I went through this personal development kind of journey, they would see me being that self-martyr, right? I'm just upset, I'm a little resentful, and they would see that. Now, because of what I'm doing, my son possibly might want to start his own YouTube channel or podcast. Like, just they do emulate you. And so when you are doing the things that you enjoy and want to do, they want to do that too, whether not necessarily things you want to do, but they want to do that as well. They want to see that. And they'll come to me and say, Mom, I think my son actually said to me, we're leaving for Florida. And he's, Mom, are you gonna take your computer? He's like, I think you need a break. I think you need to just leave the computer at home. He's telling me this now. It's working. Like,
How
he's
beautiful.
my little
Yeah.
check now, because we are all human. But we all need those checks and balances. So now he's my check because I've been able to work with them and teach him these things. And so he's, Mom, leave the computer at home. You just need a mental break. Come on, come enjoy it with us.
I love it.
Coming from my almost 12-year-old.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Oh my gosh. Michelle, I want to thank you for your time today and for sharing your experience and your exposures, and most of all your wisdom. It was very inspiring, very educational, has provoked thought in many areas, and I'm hoping that other teachers are listening and saying, "Yeah, she's right." And yes, we need to fill some of these gaps here and provide some resources and outlets for our children to feel safe and not judged. And so I really appreciate that. And please let the audience know where they can find you, what you're about, what's your why.
I think my why leads back to the fact that I did feel like a self-martyr and I didn't know what I wanted to do anymore. I felt just so lost. I love my family. I love my kids, but I realized I was a little resentful just because, but it wasn't there. I didn't know what I want to do. I wasn't giving myself the space to do it. And that's actually what led me to create Connecting Mamas, was because I realized that we as moms need that space. And yes, I can go pick up a self-help book all I want. I can read it. But again, it's no fun doing it alone. And so what I want to do is provide a community. We do this together, where I create a process called check-in, and we check in with each other and with ourselves. And actually, if you go to connectingmamas.com, you can get the free mini course, see if it even resonates with you, and then come join us. I will be starting a new cohorts in the new year to do it together in person, virtually in person, because my thinking behind this is to start virtually because we have for so long been disconnected. And so right now, I want to build a bridge for you. This is a virtual bridge where you would get a group of moms that after the course you could take with you and be your accountability in your group, no matter where you move, live, whatever. But this is your starting point, because I learned the hard way jumping into my first in-person one that I wasn't necessarily even ready for that. We're so used to doing things by ourselves and not asking for help that we need these little bridges. And so that's what I want to offer for mamas. I want to be that bridge for them, to do it in a safe space online. And it doesn't take as much time either, but it's a starting place, because right now I'm too busy. I can't do this. I don't have the time for it, but you do have time for 1 hour a week. And then that starts the curiosity, the process of, okay, I can do this for this time. Now I can start to schedule myself a little bit. Now I can see, what do I actually want to do? What are the hobbies I want? And then your kids are going to see that, and they're going to want to do them with you. And you're going to create that genuine connection together. And so come to connectingmamas.com, check out the free course, and then come join a cohort if you so choose. But all I do recommend is to start that connection, even if it's just, not even just, but the best way to do it is, you don't necessarily have to join anything yet, but when you're out at Starbucks or you're out in the grocery store and someone asks you a question, you know what? Give them a compliment or ask them one more thing. These are new habits that we're creating because we're so used to just keeping to ourselves and, oh my God, they talked to me. But let's start being more open to possibility. Just ask that one more question, or just something nice about a person, go tell them. See where it goes. It doesn't need to go anywhere, but it's that process of taking action. Small steps lead to bigger steps.
That's right. And I'm all about post-traumatic growth. Everybody's familiar with PTSD. PTG is a real thing, post-traumatic growth. And I encourage those of you that are listening as moms that have gone through a form of domestic violence, that suffer and still sort through and deal with their emotional insecurities or doubts or questioning, and those that are seeking that alignment, that mental and emotional alignment, and in that healing, not just with self but also with their children. As a survivor of a double attempted homicide, it is really hard to cope with your own emotional and mental thoughts and processes while, like Michelle said earlier, while you're that putting on the show for the kids. All of that has a lot to do with what your kids are going to absolutely grow up and be and remember, because you are everything to them, whether you believe it right now or not. And a part of the post-traumatic growth is definitely connecting with your children. So please, like Michelle's saying, she has Connecting Mamas, check it out and join the community. Thank you for tuning in.
All we need to do, ladies, is just get more connection out there, and it's not easy. It is new habits. So let's do it together.
Yep. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Michelle.
for having me on.
Thank
you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Confronting Domestic Violence is a 501c3. All contributions, volunteers, and sponsorships are welcomed. It takes a community to make a difference. Nobody should suffer alone. Please scan the QR code.